Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh to some of you, and peace out to the rest of you. Hit the share button because the message is more important than the messenger. I don't have the video where this Jamaican citizen of Chinese origin is talking and saying in the Jamaican accent that Jamaican English is not an African dialect. So I can't play it for you. I can tell you the following, though. Real Jamaicans, y'all said it. You know, black Jamaicans of West and Central African origin schooled her politely, but they took her to school. Gave her a paddling. One man said, I don't think you get it. You got that uptown English. We got downtown English where I'm coming from. And we have actual West African languages, vocabulary in Jamaican English. Uh-oh. And the way that they took her, and one man was not even from Jamaica, he was from Trinidad, and he started talking, he said, no. Even here, we got some African vernacular in our English. This woman tried to sit up and say the 2,000 Irish that the British sent into Jamaica taught 600,000 African Jamaicans how to talk. You expect me to believe this? I'm not even Caribbean. I'm just African American Creole from the Gulf Coast, and I can hear similarities in between Nigerian Pidgin and Jamaican's English. They're not identical, I know. I can hear the differences, I'm aware, but because I've actually tried to learn so many languages before, African languages included, I can hear some of the similarities. One time I told one of my Nigerian friends, let's yam that. He understood it. His language is not even a Mende language. Mende is a family of languages. It's not one. Mandinka is one of those languages, which is why it's related to the word Mende. But he understood it. He speaks Hausa. He speaks or he understands Igala. His wife is fluent in Igala. And of course, there's English. His Arabic is up fuck. This man understood what I was talking about. I've actually listened to Liberians talk and picked up on some things that Caribbeans would have understood, even though they don't sound the same. I can't remember what they were, but I remember clearly noticing them before. As a matter of fact, one time I took some Liberians to a Jamaican restaurant. And one of the Jamaican men, I asked the lady, and that was because I was referred to her by a woman that had an African restaurant down the street. I asked her if she offered any of the same dishes from the continent. She said, I don't have any continental dishes. And the man that was eating said, actually, this is African food. We got the recipes from different places, but one of them's Africa. It has to be. And the Liberian friend of mine and this Jamaican fella got to chopping it up. It was not American English that they used all the time. But they understood each other when they used American English and when they did not. This conversation happened in Atlanta. You got to understand that when you are black and you get with another black person from whom you're supposed to be different, even the same person that sees all of you as the N-word and lowly gets upset when you get along with each other. Uh-oh. People that don't hate you and don't really fear you, like your average non-black Saudi, still wonders if you're being a racist. But an actual, true, violent, or dangerous racist will take issue with it. The Trinidadian got up and said and spoke in defense of the Jamaicans. Look, let me explain something. She tried to de-Africanize Jamaica as a whole. Out of many one people, and the Irish and even Bob Marley and Marcus Garvey have Irish ancestry. Man, I don't fib a guck. See, Garvey might have gotten that name from Ireland, but understand this. Marcus Garvey, at that point in time, Being part Irish would have been a flex. Garvey flexed about being 100% pure African. He said nothing but Negro blood courses through my veins. I don't know how true it is. Ain't nobody done no DNA test on Marcus Garvey. What I do understand is that he was willing to take what was not a flex and make it a flex. That was a confession as much as it was a flex back then. He probably believed it. So that means if he had Irish blood, he must not have known about it. Bob Marley knew. But Garvey must not have known about no Irish blood. Do you see where I'm going with this, y'all? A Jamaican woman of Chinese ancestry felt the need to try to unblacken Jamaica. No, shuck that fit. Jamaica, like Haiti, is a black African nation it's just not geographically in Africa. And that's not the fault of anybody but the British and the Spaniards. They did that. And I say to anyone that's not black, even though her people did not do any slave trading that focused on Africa or singled Africa out. No, China never did that. Neither its ancient empires nor today. They don't focus on black folks for anything like bondage. And I'm not saying that they're our friends and our allies, but they don't do that. They did not do it before. That's what I'm saying. She should not have any vested interest in trying to whiten and de-blacken or unblacken Jamaica. Shouldn't be one of her interests. Why the wuck is it? It's because a lot of people simply see themselves as white just because they're not black. That's why. And I, for one, am vaingloriously proud of the way that not only did these African Jamaicans speak up, but even the way that black folks from outside who know about this have said, no, you missed me with that. Shuck that fit. Jamaican English is not a 100% African dialect. I get it. I mean, Punani, which is a bad word, didn't come from any African language of which we know. That actually came from the Indian subcontinent. I don't know which language. That place itself has a bunch of languages, but that's where it came from. Ganja is another example. What I can tell you, though, is that people from West Africa have heard Jamaicans speak, and this is back in the 90s, before social media. They heard them speak, and they said, I can hear that they come from Africa. They've told me this. One of the ways that this happened was actually because I, back in the 90s, had heard from a history teacher that Jamaicans are an African people, but that their English is not an Africanized English. And this was a Rastafarian conscious teacher that taught us this. He was the first one I ever heard talk bad about the Arabs and how they had targeted black people for slavery and enslavement, which I later found was not really the case. I later found that the Arabs did this to everybody. The Persians would enslave pretty much anyone that wasn't Persian, but they did seem to target black folks for anything bad based on color. Persians did this. And since many of them wrote in Arabic after the conquest of Islam of their land, it was later attributed to Arabs. I learned that later. And I think the history teacher that told us these things really believed it. But he was the one that said, no, the nucleus is Africa, it's not the Caribbean islands. And so later, when I was talking with some cats in Liberia, I was telling them, listen, man, from Liberia, I was telling them, listen, man, these cats from the islands, I'm just going to let y'all know right now, they might ask you all why I'm hanging out with you. They may. I don't know. But you may hear somebody come to you with a Caribbean accent asking why I'm hanging out with y'all. Because they're real big on that, we the original black man. And, they love to talk down on, especially folks like, because at that time there were people from the Caribbean, but they were from New York and New Jersey that would look down on Creoles. This was in Atlanta back then. It wasn't folks directly from the islands doing this. They were the children of those directly from the islands that had grown up in New York and New Jersey. They'd find us Creoles and look down on us. Straight up say, What you know? What you know about Jamaicans? What do you mean? What I know about Jamaica? I'm from the Gulf Coast. What am I supposed to know about Jamaica? I know it's not that far. I don't know much more than other people do. Why don't you tell me? I know your weather's nice. You tell me more. I'm listening. So, and then again, I'm not saying it was a big thing, but I knew that in the vicinity of the AUC, this was becoming a thing. So I told them, and they said, well, how are we supposed to know that they're not from the continent? And I said, well, because they're going to have a Caribbean accent, not an accent from the continent. Yeah, but how do we always know? We've heard them talk. They sound like they might just be from another country, but on the same continent to us. I was like, holy crap. So wait a minute, you mean to tell me you think they sound like they're from Africa, some part of Africa? And I said, yeah, that's an African people. Get it? Yeah, that's what was going on. That's what was happening. The Liberians began to tell me, no, they are. They are an African people, not only in their blood, but even in some of their ways and in the ways that they speak. Turned out quite a few of them had dated women from the islands and said something similar. That being said, I was proud of the way that a bunch went ahead and took this woman to school. But I want us to take a lesson from this. And that is that, oh yeah, everybody ain't got to hate us. People that don't hate us still feel the need to partition and compartmentalize us from each other. Just you being happy with your blackness can bother some folks. They want you to ignore your own heritage. And they'll never ignore theirs. That woman probably can't speak a sentence of Mandarin or Cantonese or any of the other languages that we usually call Chinese. She probably can't. Then again, maybe she has made the effort to learn some in order to preserve it. Because you know it's her heritage. I've had this happen before. Had a Jordanian once tell me, why do you say that you're African and you've been in America hundreds of years? And I said, well, listen, he was a Jordanian in the U.S. I said, well, listen, you're from Jordan. Do you want your kids to be proud of and understand Jordan, at least visit, keep some ties? Yeah, of course. I said, okay, yeah. Do you want your grandkids to? Yeah. I said, okay. So you don't have a cutoff point. You don't have a point at which you say, I want my kids to forget about Jordan. It doesn't matter no more. I'm in America. You don't have that point. But you came to this country voluntarily. You wanted to come here to study. And that's cool. But if you stayed here and even if you married an American woman that's not Jordanian, just American, you don't have a cutoff point at which you don't want your descendants to pay any more attention to Jordan. You don't want that to happen. Okay, fine. You don't want your origin to be forgotten by your descendants later. And you came here willingly. If my ancestors were forced over here involuntarily, then why should they have a cutoff point? And why should I honor such a cutoff point? It doesn't exist. They never said this. My ancestors didn't come into the Americas saying, well, my fourth, fifth generation descendants should no longer think about home. They never asked to leave. It's the only place from which people did not want to leave to go to the United States, that they were forced to go. Everybody wanted to go to the United States. Even before it was the U.S., everyone wanted to go to this particular part of the New World. They all wanted to go except us. So they came and got us. And to this day, in Saudi, when people say, how can I get a visa to go to America? I say, make things comfortable here to where you don't want to leave. They will come and get you. That's how you do it. Work for us just fine. And neither we over there nor our homeland from which we were taken has ever recovered since then. That's what'll work. You want to get to America? Do that. Watch me. Maybe that's one of the reasons why a lot of Gulf people are lazy. Maybe they weaponize the laziness so that they wouldn't make good captives. I don't know. Funny thing is, a lot of them really aren't that lazy. But that's a stereotype. Academically speaking, they were. But that's another story for another day. But yeah, I'm vaingloriously proud of the way the black folk came and schooled this woman. But don't forget the lesson inherent in this, because I've seen Arabs do the same thing. Non-black Arabs do the same thing. Well, you have nothing to do with Africa. Oh, really? Okay. So let's say you migrate. Let's say you go to Australia. You get a good job in Australia. You go, you take it. Okay, fine. Even marry a white Australian woman, blonde hair, blue eyes. You want your kids to know about the country from which you came? Yes, of course. Okay. What about your grandkids? Yes, absolutely. Okay, all right. So you don't have a cutoff point. This is the conversation I've had to have with a few of them even here. But because somebody was taken by force away from Africa to somewhere else, they're supposed to say that this other place was so great, they just forget about Africa. Who wants Africa anyway? No. The troubles that you have in Africa they are directly due to depopulation and colonization. The depopulation being due to the slave trade and colonization. Africa was diverse. There were parts that were up. There were parts that were great. There were parts that everything in the middle. Africa's diverse. It's a continent. It's not a country. So how did a continent, and it still is diverse to this day, but how did a continent become overwhelmingly a place people want to leave? How'd that happen? You take an entire region as big as that, same surface area as the moon. How do you get that whole region to be a place that people would readily leave if they could get a visa out of there? It's real simple. You got it. You have to do that. It's not going to happen like that on its own. People don't build hell for themselves. Things can turn to hell and go to hell, but what human being is going to go and build a hell for themselves? There's no species that does that. Species that are as stupid as flies, like flies, they don't build a hell for themselves. A fly won't do that. And they're pretty dumb. The only intelligence a fly has is to spread disease. They literally don't have any other intelligence. You can't shoot them away. You can't drive them away. You can't lure them away. You're eating and there are flies around. They're going to come try to get in your food that you're eating. You could throw some food off to the side thinking it'll distract them. They will leave that to come where you're eating because they're trying to spread disease. They have no other intelligence outside of that. I'm not joking. You can kill. They're around here. In the town I was in, they were everywhere. You can kill 4 flies and the 5th one will see you kill the other 4 and he'll still keep trying to get to your food because you're eating it. But they don't build a hell for themselves. That they don't do. And they want us to believe that just black people just all throughout Africa went and built a hell for themselves and it's all our fault. That's the mindset behind that dumb broad stinking. Jamaican is not an African dialect. How about you fuck the shuck up trying to sound British? You can't even do it. Oh, they love to do that. It ain't just her. You're going to see this with quite a few people. And you're going to see this with people that don't even mean any harm. They don't want anything bad for you. They could genuinely love you as a person. But when it comes to the equality of Africa with other continents, which are not countries, by the way, notice that. They can't fathom it. See, a lot of bias is not just people thinking that you're less than equal to other races. It is also in the understanding that your continent is less than equal to other continents, despite the fact that the only continent that's actually a country is Australia, because the British made it so with guns. You're dealing with a lot. And understand this. I got some good news as well, but that's on the Patreon. And I'll put it in the community. I'll put a link to it in the community tab, and you might get a link for one of my first class flyers on Patreon. They're my first class flyers on Jet Black Airways. They get stuff you don't get. And the good news that I'm putting on Patreon, I'm not gonna make it free. I'll go ahead and make that available on Odyssey for $1 behind if you want just that by itself. But it ain't gonna be free because you got people paying for it, and they should get something that others don't get. It's only fair. So if you want it by itself, you can go to Odyssey. My account on Odyssey. And it's just a US dollar to get that one by itself. But you can get it on Patreon for $5 a month. And every few days I put something on Patreon. So you still get a better deal if you go to the Patreon. But if you don't want to do a monthly commitment, then that's okay. Odyssey's better for that. That's why I put the good news up. And it is good news. Absolutely, it's good news. Of a historical value as well. Ronald Neal would definitely appreciate this because what I put on Patreon, he would appreciate it because he's seen some of this himself when he went to Senegal and Gambia. So if he goes and sees it, he can tell you if what I'm saying is the truth or not. Even if he disagreed with something as an opinion, he would know it's not a lie. He'd be able to see that, and he'll tell you. Because Ron O'Neill's generally been honest. Nobody's always right, but he's been honest. He'll tell you. So yeah, y'all can check that out when you get the time or the funds. Look in the community tab for those links. And if you're lucky enough to be close to one of my Patreon subscribers, one of my first class flyers on Jet Black Airways, you might get a link from them too. You all keep on putting these folks in their place, because, you know, being pro-black does not mean that you got to be pro-black gynocracy. We understand that. But it doesn't mean that we still have to sit up and just let anybody say any old thing or buy into any of their biases, be they conscious or subconscious. That woman, she needed to be schooled, because no Jamaican sat up and ever said that they can speak Jamaican patois and walk into an interior village where they don't speak English on the continent, anywhere on the continent, West or Central, and they're going to be understood because they're just that African. They don't say stupid stuff like that. They'll tell you, yeah, we got words from other vocabulary, words from non-African languages in Jamaican English. Yeah, of course that exists. English was forced on them. Of course that does. But you do have also an African contribution. And we resent the notion of you saying that Africans can't talk and therefore contribute to other languages like other folks can do, or dialects for that matter. They put in a place. There was nothing gynocratic about that. Nothing. And I tip my hat to them, because while there is gynocentrism in Jamaica, they also fight back. I learned that from two yardies that were on one of my live streams. Shout out to Deano Gordon. And I forgot the other one's name. Sorry about that, man. If I had my laptop, I could have looked on and seen what it is. But shout out to them for that. They schooled me and let me know that, oh, there's gynocentrism to a certain extent. There's also resistance. So you're going to deal with the hyena bitch, but people can fight back too. So what this means is you don't have unchecked gynocentrism, let alone gynocracy, driving the pro-blackness of them telling Mrs. Chin, yeah, I said it, that she wrong. And ignorantly so too, with a dumb ass. Well, Jamaican is not a fuck shuck up. Before I slap you the opposite color. It's one thing to say that it's not spoken in Africa. Yeah, well, that's not their fault either. But she wanted to make it sound like there was no contribution, that it's just actually, you know, they love to sit up and say, where does this come from? Where does patois come from? Obviously, it comes from multiple languages being forced upon the people that had their own languages. That's where it comes from. Hell, you got the development of a Saudi English right now. And I tell the Saudis, if you want to have your own English between each other and it's all upped up according to formal standards, that's your business. But when you are using English with English speakers that are not from here, you don't get to make these mistakes just unchecked. You get to make them because you're students and because you're learning. You don't get to make the mistakes into something that's correct. You don't get to do that. And you don't get to teach this in an English class, these mistakes. That's fair. They want to develop their own English for themselves, fine. We're not making them do it. It's up to them. It's their choice. But they're going to understand the difference between that and formal English you got to speak internationally, that we have to teach them in the class. So in Jamaica, they speak patois to each other. If you want them to speak it to you, they probably will, if you can answer them back, or at least if you can understand them. But for the most part, when they're speaking to non-Jamaicans, they turn and they use a formal English. And they can be pretty good at it. A lot of times they are. They code switch. Most black folks code switch, even here in Saudi. So guess what? That means they are actually more considerate and better people than most Egyptians. Because a lot of Egyptians don't feel a guck. They're going to talk to you in Egyptian. You can learn classical, formal, standard Arabic and talk to someone, and they'll probably try to answer you in that, or they'll say, I don't understand it, I don't speak it, at least that, for the most part. We got some dumb Bedouins here that start talking in broken Arabic because you spoke to them in formal Arabic. And other people will say this guy's stupid anyway. So, but with Egyptians, oh, absolutely, they don't feel a guck. You ask them to teach you Arabic, they're not going to say, well, we have our own. Do you want Egyptian Arabic or standard Arabic? They don't even say no. They just, oh, great, this is my opportunity to F his Arabic up so that only Egyptians can understand him. Have him sounding like us in front of everybody else, even though they won't understand him. That's how they are. That's the way they do it. They don't fib a guck. And I know because I've talked to them before, and they never clean up their Arabic when they're talking to a non-Egyptian. You can't understand them. You're not supposed to be able to, not logically. They don't care. You want to make fun of somebody? Go make fun of them for the way they talk. And fit the guck off our backs. Thanks for listening. As always, black heart, black mind, black out, assalamu alaikum, and black heterosexual, non-select male power just because Miss Chin don't like it, and black patriarchy till extinction of judgment day. Thank you for flying again with me on Jet Black Airways, where jet black is also a verb. Hope you keep jetting black with me till the wings and the wheels fall off. Justice forever.